reality still seeming weird to me. I'm stuck. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about something that I've mentioned in a lot of my prior videos. I deal with anxiety and dissociation, and I've never really gone into how I cope with it, but I know that it is something that a lot of people experience these days. So I'm gonna share what it's like for me, what my symptoms are like. We're all different, and then give you guys some tips on how I personally cope with it. I'm not a doctor, I am not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, so this is just all my story, my personal experience. I am going to be going in depth with what my symptoms are like and trying to describe it vividly. So if that's something that you're sensitive to, I just want to let you know that ahead of time. So I have definitely had anxiety for as long as I can remember. The first form of anxiety that I remember having was separation anxiety when I was young. And I remember the feeling of that, like just feeling like nervous, fearful, like I was like something catastrophic was going to happen. So that is something that I've dealt with in different forms throughout my life. Now I have driving anxiety, now I have flight anxiety. I just have to use certain methods that I know work to help with me coping and relaxing myself. It does get in the way of my everyday living to some degree, but there's like another layer onto it that makes it much more difficult for me, and that is my dissociation disorder, which I do not hear a lot of people talk about. So I'm gonna go into what happens to me. I have felt alone for a really long time because every time I look up videos about mental health, everyone's talking about depression and anxiety and these more unfortunately common mental health disorders, but I just don't see that much information on dissociation, and that is, got that. So yes, I've had anxiety for my whole life, but it has never been as bad as I got it last year, just before the onset of COVID. It was starting to ramp up, and then when COVID hit, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm gonna go into detail about the whole journey for the last year, but first let's go into dissociation and what that sensation is like for me. The first memory that I have of dissociation was in grade 6. At the time, it was fun, which sounds so weird to say because now it's terrifying, but back then it was so brief that it was actually like exciting. If I had to try to describe dissociation, it feels like a realization that life is real. It feels like this hyper acute awareness of consciousness and how impossible it seems that disrupts me and breaks me from the flow of life. Once I'm disrupted from my flow, I'm just entirely consumed by this realization that I'm here, you're here, we're all here, this is really happening, and my mind cannot process that. It feels like dire overwhelm. What do you do when you're uncomfortable in a state like that? Like, of course you know what to do when you're uncomfortable in a shirt. You take it off. You're uncomfortable in an environment, you leave. But when you feel this discomfort that feels unbearable in your cognitive experience, it's impossible to escape. You cannot resist that. I mean, you can resist that, but that makes it way worse when you're fighting it and you're trying to not feel like that. It's way easier to actually submit. That helps reduce the anxiety on top of it. If I can try to describe it in another way, because I kind of feel like the first way I went into it, you would know what I'm talking about if you felt it. You would be like, yes, that's it. That's how you put it into words. But if you've never felt it, you're like, what the hell are you talking about? That sounds ridiculous. So if any of you have had the feeling of hearing a word that you've said your whole life in like every sentence, like take the word and. You say and one day and then you're like, and. Is that right? That sounds weird. Is that it? And someone's like, yeah, that's the word. You're like, that word just doesn't sound like a real word right now. It's that unfamiliar feeling of a familiar thing. It's that feeling toward existence where it's like, this doesn't feel familiar. I've been doing this the whole time. How How did I get to this point in life? When you're in the flow of life, you don't realize how distracted you are, how not present you're being. I'm doing this, I'm caught up in my thoughts, I'm thinking about the future, I have this thing going on, I have to check the laundry. You're taken away from all of that and you're just shot into this analyzing of it from the outside in, not from the inside out. You're not in it, you're out looking at it and separated. But that's happening in your brain. This is why I never thought I would talk about this. I never thought I would talk about this, but I'm making this, and regardless of feeling judged or people not understanding or thinking that I'm making it up, because I know somebody is gonna feel less lonely hearing somebody else describe what they're going through and seeing that you can overcome the fear. It's like you've been in autopilot, you've been in auto, and now you're shifted gear. All of a sudden you're in manual. You feel in over your head, not equipped, out of your league. And the safest thing to do when you feel like that is nothing. So you just kind of go in. Yeah. So for me, all of that comes with like a hypervigilance. Everything feels vivid, very vivid. It's not like hallucination. I don't actually see colors differently or the world differently. I don't see in a warped way. I just feel like sight is overwhelming and I end up blinking a lot because of it. So if you ever see me at your local grocery store picking up my can of tomato soup and all of a sudden I'm like, your girl is dissociating. That's what's happening. This makes like my eyes tired. It makes my nerves feel like strained. I've never had a migraine. I know it kind of can sound like sensitivity to light, sight, you know, your eyes hurting. It's not a headache. I don't get a headache. I just feel exhausted. My eyes feel exhausted, and so the only thing I want to do is close them and lay down to avoid sensory overload, which is kind of the feeling. You feel like you can't be in conversation, you cannot hear too much music. Loud sudden sounds make me jump. Someone could like snap their finger and I'll it's like PTSD reactions almost, and nothing helps me reset from it like just going to sleep and waking up the next day. Just relaxing, stopping, and then letting my body recalibrate, and then I can start the process over again. That's how I would describe dissociation. I'm sure it's different for everybody, but let's get into how it is described medically. Dissociative disorders are mental disorders that involve experiencing a disconnection and lack of continuity between thoughts, memories, surroundings, actions, and identity. People with dissociative disorders escape reality in ways that are involuntary and unhealthy and cause problems with functioning in everyday life. When a person experiences dissociation, it may look like daydreaming, spacing out, or eyes glazed over, acting different or using a different tone of voice or different gestures, suddenly switching between emotions or reactions to an event, such as appearing frightened and timid, and then becoming bombastic and violent. Your girl doesn't have that side. I just get scared. Periods of dissociation can last for a relatively short time, hours or days, or for much longer, weeks or months. It can sometimes last for years. Many people with a dissociative disorder have had a traumatic event during childhood. I've openly spoken about my traumatic event. I can link that video above if you haven't seen it and you want to check it out. Dissociation related to anxiety may occur during a stressful, anxiety-inducing event or during or after a period of intense worry. This is the case for me. Because dissociation is based in avoidance coping, it works in the short term but has long-term negative consequences. So yeah, this is why you want to deal with the source of what's going on and not just avoid it, because it's going to continue to be triggered. So all of this sounds incredibly intense. It also does feel that way. But it actually used to be fun for me when I was a little girl, because it would hit me so quickly and leave that I would just have this moment of like, whoa, life is real. Have you ever thought about how real life is? I know people have had those conversations a lot, but it's not just thinking your way into it, it's being shot into it by your body. So you're experiencing it, you're not just thinking about it. So I would be feeling it briefly, like every couple years maybe. Last year I got stuck in it. It lasted, it wasn't just minutes, it wasn't just the days or weeks, it lasted months. And so I'm gonna get into that. Okay, so last year, leading up to COVID, I was experiencing a lot of anxiety and burnout regarding my career, because at that point I had been doing it for about a decade, and I knew I needed a change, that I was just experiencing this like cognitive dissonance, and that would lead me to my first couple of panic attacks. It was like a couple over the span of 6 months, maybe a year even, leading up to COVID. I knew that I needed to do something about that, but I never thought that it could lead to a drastic change in my health. And so I didn't consider it a health problem. I just kind of kept doing what I was doing and making it worse. It's sad that I had to wait until it disrupted my work life for me to think of it as my health. That's the lesson I think I needed to learn from this, was that I let it go on so long until I couldn't function anymore, and then I cared about it. And now I will never push myself like that again. I know to put myself first so that I can avoid my body rebelling and like screaming at me and telling me like, you need to listen and you need to stop. So with the dissociation throughout this, like I said, it was once every couple years, and then it was once every couple months. And I would start to tell my boyfriend like, this thing I used to get when I was little is like happening a lot more frequently now. And then it started once every couple weeks. And then I started to feel like weird about that. It was only fun when it was like rare, like super duper rare. And then it started to get kind of concerning. And then it started happening once every couple days. And at that point, my anxiety around it was bad. So like when I would feel it starting, the fear feeling throughout my entire body, threat response would kick in, and I would feel like, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, trying to resist it. And then one night, we were watching this episode of Anxiety Explained. I think it's like a Netflix show, and it goes into like what anxiety feels like and what's going on in your body. That was starting to trigger me. As it was describing what was happening in someone's body when they felt anxiety, it started happening to me, to the point where I had a full-on panic attack, and I needed the show to be turned off, and the room started spinning. I felt like I had like no equilibrium. Like I was nauseous. The room was spinning. I was just like over the toilet. I felt like I was going to throw up. I was dissociating so hard. So I just couldn't grasp reality. I just felt like I couldn't grasp it. And it was not fleeting. It was not fleeting. It was sticking with me, this sensation. The longer it stuck with me, the worse my panic attack got. And so this lasted couple hours, and my boyfriend was helping me through it. He had already at this point helped me through panic attacks before. This one was different. I eventually was able to calm down enough to try to fall asleep, which was difficult. I remember vividly how difficult it was. But I told myself, okay, you're gonna fall asleep and you're gonna wake up and you're gonna be back to normal. You're gonna be back to normal. You're just gonna wake up and it's gonna be gone just as quickly as it came. And then I woke up and it was still there. This was the turning point. This is when I started putting A and B together. 1 + 1 = 2 at this point. I was like, okay, this has been every couple years, then every couple months, then every couple weeks, then every couple days, then a couple times a day. Now it's here for good. Like reality is still seeming weird to me. I'm stuck. I should have been paying attention to this all along. I'm stuck. So I started to flip out. And when I freak out, I'm not the type that's like, the more I freak out, the more inward I go. And so it just becomes this like turmoil, and I just like don't want the blinds open. I'm like just scared to move. And so I contacted my doctor. This was during COVID, so they weren't seeing anyone in person. I had to wait a couple days to even speak to someone on the phone. And this whole time I had to stop auditioning. I was just trying to be okay with this being my state until I could speak to a professional. And I remember when my boyfriend, he would take me on drives, try to calm me down, listen to music, and I would just kind of be like that the whole time. And I remember when the doctor called me, he was trying to be like so professional and like calm about it, but he called me and I was just like, I instantly started crying. And he was just like, okay, what are you experiencing? What's going on? And I was like, I can't understand life. I was so bad at explaining it to him. So I got professional help and I spoke to another doctor. And what I was grateful for about my doctor was they immediately looked at it from this perspective of, you need to fix what is triggering this in your life. That's the kind of thought process that led me to eventually moving to Florida, changing up my career, taking a step back from entertainment, just making those changes that were not working for me anymore. I had to listen because my health was on the line at this point. And then I also started from the inside out with these apps that came with my insurance at the time. I'll just name a few, none of these are sponsored, this is just what I did, was Calm. Oh my God, Tamara Levitt and the Calm app. If you're not hip to it, you need to look it up. That app is, you know, it's about meditations, sleep stories, and it's just beautiful. I will never stop using the Calm app. I used another one called My Strength, which helped with cognitive behavioral therapy. It was like an online therapist. And then also another one called Silver Cloud. I was like very dedicated, started doing yoga to retraining my body to relax, because when you're in a heightened state like that, your body is getting conditioned to responding out of fear and adrenaline, fight or flight. And so my heart rate was just naturally higher than it should have been during this time. My breathing was more shallow. My reaction to things was quick and startled. I needed to start working on reconditioning my body so that my body could connect calm to my brain. So those apps helped me basically rehabilitate myself. I also made changes like working on negative self-talk. I would catastrophize things. I learned to be patient with myself. I learned to be fair to myself, and I learned to recognize and celebrate progress even if it wasn't linear. I also stopped doing stimulating things during certain times of day, because there was a certain time that it always came on for me hardest, and that was like evening, like around 5-6 p.m. And so anything past that time was just relaxing. I stopped drinking alcohol, I stopped drinking caffeine, and I stopped consuming as many added sugars as I can avoid. My body tends to not like foreign substances like that like alter my adrenaline or alter my perception. This is another big one. I also completely cut out TV shows that were showing me violence or emulating anxiety to me. Shows that would, you know, highlight someone having a panic attack or someone in a warped reality. I cut that out, and because social media was so unpredictable, I just limited going on there at all. Another good one is that I also started to go on walks and meditate to practice not being freaked out by being present. I find that a lot of like people say that it's really helpful when you're having anxiety or when you're dissociating to ground yourself. That didn't work for me. That never worked for me, because my problem with anxiety and my problem with dissociating was always that I felt hyper present. Like I felt way too in tune with what was happening around me. So for me to like look at my feet and look at the grass and do more of that, that would only make things worse for me. All I wanted in those moments was to feel distracted by thoughts, just to have an active mind. I didn't want to have a still mind, because that was what was making me feel weird. I had to start to practice allowing myself to be present without being freaked out by it. So that brings us to where I'm at today, and I am at a year, just over a year since all of that happened. And when all of it hit me, I immediately flew to my parents, stopped everything, and made sure I had no more responsibilities, told everyone, you're not gonna hear from me or see me for a while. Where I'm at now is such a different place than where I was then, and I'm just so proud that I can even make this video and share my journey with you guys, because I never thought I would be able to talk about it without it freaking me out. I mean, it took me months to get to the point where I could even do basic things like go to the grocery store with my dad. And now I'm at the point where I'm making YouTube videos again, and that feels great. And so I just want that to be hope for anyone who might be going through the same thing. The biggest takeaway, if you're experiencing this, that I want you to have is, don't think of it as I'm going to go back to normal one day. That was my biggest flaw, was that I was like, okay, it came on so suddenly, it's gonna leave suddenly, and I'm gonna be right back to how I was. It's more of a process than that, and that is okay. There are moments where I feel completely myself and completely functional and able. And then there's moments when I don't. But the difference is I've given myself permission to get used to dissociation to the point where I don't resist it and I don't feel like I'm not myself. I have experience with it now enough to know how to manage it when it's happening, honor that it's happening, and accept that it's there and it's a part of me right now, and know that it probably will go away one day. All of that is okay. It's just important to take the steps that you need to get to a place where you can function and take care of yourself and feel proud of your process. You need to take care of your mind like it is any other organ in your body. We understand that any other organ can get sick, and we go to the doctor and we talk about it and we tell people and we take time off from work. But when it's our mind, there is this ridiculous stigma and shame that comes with your mind having an illness, which is strange because it is like any other organ and it's talking to you and you need to adjust for it and make space for it. I feel like it's the thing that we ignore the most is our mental health. When we feel like we're at our wit's end, we still go, we keep pushing, and we clap when other people ignore that they're tired and burnt out and exhausted and depressed and anxious and show up anyway. If you can just stop doing that to yourself, that would be a beautiful thing. There are people that want to hear what you're going through, that understand what you're going through, and have so much information to offer you about what you're going through. So don't keep it to yourself. Tell your family, tell your loved ones, speak to a doctor. With mental, emotional, and spiritual disturbances, there's so many resources that are out there for you, and I'm gonna leave a couple in the description box. If you're feeling like you're uncomfortable talking to anyone about what you're going through, please look in the description box. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to feel like you can talk about your mental experiences. And I urge you to click some of the links, text a friend, anything that allows you to share what's going on with you. All right, you guys, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this helps somebody out there, and remember to take care of yourself. All right, see you in the next one.